So, greetings to the professor and myself, Manchu Sani. I'm going to present my topic for technical seminar, that is HCCI and CAI engines in automotive industry. So, I'll be beginning with the index, where as you can see, I'll be starting with HCCI engine, and then I'll be describing its principal, advantages, disadvantages, and why is it required in short. And I'll be shifting to CAI engines and describing the same things. After that, I'll be describing the challenges of the HCCI and CAI engines and ending with the future scope. So HCCI engine stands for homogeneous charge compression ignition engine. It is used for diesel engines, whereas CAI engine stands for controlled auto ignition, and it is used for gasoline engines. So HCCI engine is basically the major difference here is there's a homogeneous charge, and homogeneous charge is compressed with the help of a piston, and there's no spark plug required for the mixture to ignite. The complete combustion process happens on its own when the fuel charge mixture, when the homogeneous charge reaches a point where it is equivalent to its ignition temperature. The good thing about this is it uses very less fuel, and the emissions are very less when we compare it to CI or SI engines. This we'll be discussing in the further slides of the PPT. Another good point about HCCI engine is that it has the properties of both CI and SI engines, which makes it really good. Now here's a video that is showing between the difference between the CI, SI and HCCI engines. So basically a diesel engine, you can see there's a fuel injector which is used to inject the fuel. In the gasoline in the gasoline engine, there's a spark ignition engine, there's a spark plug which ignites the fuel and the air mixture. But when you see an HCCI engine, you can see there's a homogeneous charge. Homogeneous charge means here's a uniform mixture of the fuel, of the air. So this is something very different from the gasoline and the diesel engine. Other than that, you can see the emissions. If you see the diesel engine, there are hot flame region. The hot flame region is very different, and it has NOx particles. NOx means NO2, NO3, NO, nitrous oxide, nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen trioxide plus smoke. Whereas the spark ignition engine has only NOx, no smoke. For the HCCI engine, the emissions are very low. Now, need of HCCI engine, basically there are two reasons. One is that the fuel efficiency will increase, it will increase the fuel economy. The other reason is that it will reduce the emissions. The emissions means carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, NOx particles and particulates. Particulates in soot means the unburned hydrocarbons. Basically it represents the unburned hydrocarbons. The working principle of HCCI engine is very simple, and it's a little different from the CI and SI engine. Basically the homogeneous charge is compressed with the help of a piston, and as it reaches a temperature which is equivalent to the ignition temperature, the fuel and the charge auto ignites, and during the combustion stroke, and power is produced. Also the concentration and temperature of the charge can be controlled with the following parameter. It depends on the following parameters, that is high compression ratio, preheating of induction gases, forced induction, and retaining or introducing of exhaust gases. It's a 4-stroke engine, as we know that like the CI or a 4-stroke CI or a 4-stroke SI engine. It's similar to that. The 4 strokes are same: suction, compression, expansion, exhaust. And this chart represents the 4 different strokes. Initially, the premixed fuel and air are injected into the cylinder. Then the compression happens, which increases the pressure, and it reaches the pressure and temperature, and it reaches to a temperature where it auto ignites, and then the mixture expands. And this is the chart. This is the graph that represents that is showing the in-cylinder pressure against the crank angle. As you can see, as the mixture is compressed, the temperature and the pressure is increased. So this tip is representing that. The best thing about HCCI engine is that the emissions of hydrocarbons and NOx are very less. Advantage and disadvantage: when we talk about the advantage, again, fuel economy is really good. The temperature is lower, peak temperatures are there, lower emissions are there, and can use gasoline, diesel, or most alternative fuels. Disadvantage is there: the pressure is very high, so it may damage the engine, and there's a lot of research going on to predict the exact auto ignition point in the HCCI engine. And even I have read a lot of research papers in which I have read that a lot of research is going on to find out the exact point where the ignition happens in an HCCI engine. The other disadvantage is the smaller power range, and I think this is the main reason due to which the HCCI engines have not come into existence in our day, in the daily vehicles, and this is the reason we are still using the CAI engines, because the power range is very small of the HCCI engines. CAI represents control auto ignition engine, and these are the main things which are the properties like characteristics. Compression ignition in the gasoline requires high compression ratio and can be used in dual mode. These topics will be discussed in detail in the report. Since it's a PPT, I'm not going into detail into these topics. Emissions. Now here's a comparison between the emissions of a CAI and SI engine, control auto ignition and spark ignition. You can see from the chart, it's very clear that when we see the NOx emissions and when we see the carbon emissions, there's a big difference, and in the emissions given by CAI and SI engine, they are not even comparable. But in the hydrocarbon, the CAI engines, they have a higher end as compared to the SI engines. Like the CAI engines emit more hydrocarbons, which is, I think, almost justified, because if you see the other two emissions, they are very less when compared to the SI engine. The advantage, disadvantage again. The advantage is the NOx emissions are very less. It has a very high efficiency and high part load efficiency, and knocking is very less. That's a really good thing. And flame propagation and burn duration is, there's no problem regarding that. Disadvantage is that power output is again very less as compared like the HCCI engine, and hydrocarbon emission is really high in this case, although it has a very low CO emission compared to the SI engine, but still that emission is still a problem for us. So now the challenges over HCCI and HCCI and CAI engine. The first biggest challenge is that there's a control required over the HCCI engines. That's a basic thing that we require right now. Control in the HCCI engine, it refers to the ignition point, ignition temperature. As I discussed, there's a lot of research going on to find out the exact ignition point where the ignition happens in HCCI engine. Then the high peak pressure, whereas the low temperature. So low temperature is a good thing, but high peak pressure is a little bit of, it gets a little bit problem, as it can damage the engine walls, and this is the reason the engine needs to be stronger and heavier. Power range is very less. That's a really good thing, but the hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide emissions are less, but still we need to minimize them as much as we can. So now we'll discuss the future scopes, the works that are going on in different. So the car that you see here is Opel Vectra. It has HCCI engines. Other than that, there are many countries like Japan and many of the European countries like Germany which are working to develop some HCCI engines. And till now you will find some of the companies like Ford, Nissan, Toyota, Volvo, General Motors, etc., that they have been performing research to manufacture good quality HCCI engine. HCCI engine, they're already existing, but they're not widely used, they're not widely accepted because of certain issues. Other than that, you can see these are some of the research areas on which a lot of research is going on regarding HCCI engine. For example, control of combustion timing across the load speed map, controlling the heat release for high load operation. These are some of the things on which research is still going on to develop HCCI engines. Now this is the chart which shows some of the companies and their cars. This is the model of the car which have been equipped with HCCI engines, and this shows the year in which they were used. Now the references for this have been listed below. I have used the paper HZ's Howe Brunel University, West London. This is the paper which I have referred. Other than this, this is a review paper by Swapnil P. Afte, Shreya B. Bangare, Darya S. Diora Homogeneous Charge Compression Ignition Engine. So I have used these two papers. The last one is a review paper, the first one is a research paper. Other than that, have used some other links which I have mentioned here. Thank you so much for giving your valuable time and attention to my PPT of technical seminar. Thank you.